I never imagined that at 60, I would feel the kind of excitement that a young woman might feel at 20. Yet, here I was, sitting at my vanity, smoothing the neckline of my silk dress, my heart hammering like it was 17 again. My name is Margaret, and I married a man 20 years younger than me. His name is Ethan. People thought I was crazy. My friends whispered behind my back at the country club, "Margaret, really? At your age?" My own adult children shook their heads and tried to hide their disbelief behind polite smiles. But Ethan, he saw me. He looked past the gray hairs, past the slight curves time had added to my body, past the world's judgment. And he loved me. It didn't start with passion. It started with friendship. Ethan came into my life as an intern at my publishing company, eager, ambitious, full of life, and yes, charming. I was his mentor at first. I taught him about manuscripts, about deadlines, about people who hide their true intentions behind polite smiles. He listened, he laughed, he stayed late asking questions, learning. And slowly, something shifted. It wasn't inappropriate at first, I would have recognized that, but it was electric. I felt alive again, the kind of alive you feel only when someone sees your soul, not just your face. He admired me in ways my husband never had. He respected me. And then, one evening, after a particularly long night at the office, he touched my hand, and I felt my heart betray my mind. "I know this is unexpected," he whispered. "But I can't help how I feel." I looked at him, innocent, sincere, breathtakingly young, and I realized I couldn't either. So we began a relationship. Carefully, privately, hiding it from colleagues and friends. People were suspicious of our age difference, but we didn't care. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. Then came the day I decided to propose. Yes, I, Margaret, a woman of 60, proposed to a man barely 20. And he said yes. The wedding planning was a quiet affair. No extravagant parties. Just our closest friends, a beautiful garden, flowers blooming as if they knew this was meant to be. But as the day approached, I felt an uneasy sensation in my chest. Something I couldn't name. The wedding day came, and Ethan was radiant. But so was someone else in his life. I didn't know her name at first, a woman his age who seemed to appear everywhere, always smiling too brightly, always lingering too close. I brushed it off. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I was being paranoid. But my instincts, honed over decades, whispered, "She's trouble." The ceremony was beautiful, the vows sincere. And yet, in the crowd, I felt eyes watching me, not admiration, not respect, but envy. I smiled, waving politely, but the unease in my stomach grew heavier by the hour. Then, the first sign of betrayal came, not from whispers, not from photos, but from a casual message on Ethan's phone I glimpsed for a second while charging it in another room. A text from a woman I didn't know, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Missed you." My heart stopped. My fingers shook. And yet, I didn't confront him, not yet. I waited, watching, gathering clues. Because one thing I knew for sure, I was not going to be made a fool in my own story. After the wedding, life should have been bliss. Ethan and I were supposed to spend quiet mornings with coffee, afternoons in the garden, and evenings curled up with our favorite books. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started with small things, Ethan's distracted glances at his phone, sudden texts he hid too quickly, calls he stepped outside to take. I told myself it was nerves, stress from the wedding, adjustment to married life. But deep inside, I knew better. One night, while he was in the shower, I noticed his laptop open on the kitchen counter. My heart beat faster, but curiosity and fear pushed me forward. A few clicks revealed what I already dreaded: emails and messages to a woman named Lila. Lila. Always Lila. His words weren't subtle. I can't stop thinking about you. I wish I could see you tonight. You're the only one who makes me feel alive. I felt my chest tighten. The man I had married for love, the man I thought had chosen me fully and openly, was betraying me, not subtly, not carelessly, but with full intent. I wanted to confront him immediately. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, to let all the fury and hurt pour out. But I stayed quiet. Watching him in that moment, I realized he was still young, still inexperienced, still blinded by desire. And if I reacted rashly, I might lose my leverage, my ability to understand the full extent of this deception. So I began watching. Not in a paranoid, obsessive way, but carefully, deliberately. I checked social media accounts, traced calls, asked discreet questions through friends and colleagues. The pieces fell together horrifyingly fast. Lila wasn't just a fling. She had been in his life long before I proposed. She had orchestrated events, nudged conversations, planted doubts, and manipulated Ethan subtly, like a spider spinning her web. One Friday afternoon, Ethan went out to run errands. I followed, careful to remain unseen. He met Lila in a quiet cafe downtown. They laughed, leaned close, whispered words that were not meant for anyone else's ears. I snapped photos from across the street, my hands trembling. Every laugh, every touch, every glance was evidence. That night, Ethan came home and kissed me, oblivious. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, smiling warmly. I nodded, my stomach churning, my mind racing. I had proof now, undeniable proof. But I didn't show him, at least not yet. I needed more. I needed to know whether this was infatuation, a temporary distraction, or a full-blown betrayal. So I dug deeper. I called some of his coworkers, pretending to ask innocuous questions about his schedule. I traced Lila's activities online. I uncovered hotel bookings in nearby towns, gifts sent from Ethan that he claimed were for family or friends, all quietly paid for and hidden. When the truth became undeniable, I felt something strange, a mixture of heartbreak, rage, and cold clarity. Ethan, my husband, my love, my student of life, had been lying to me from the very beginning. Lila was younger, cunning, and manipulative, and he, despite all his charm and affection, was too naive to resist her. I confronted him finally one evening, in our living room, the warm lamplight casting shadows across his face. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm but steady. "I know about Lila." His face paled. He opened his mouth, stammered, tried to protest. But I held up the folder of printed messages and photos. "I saw everything. Don't deny it. Don't lie to me. I know who she is and what you've been doing." He slumped into the sofa, his hands over his face. "Margaret, it's not what you think." But I didn't let him speak. I simply watched him crumble. The betrayal was raw, real, undeniable. The next days were tense. He tried to justify, to explain, to claim he loved me and that it meant nothing, that it was just a fling, a curiosity. But every lie only dug the hole deeper. He didn't realize I wasn't just hurt, I was calculating. Because betrayal isn't just about pain. It's about opportunity. And Margaret, at 60, had learned to turn pain into strategy. I started planning. Carefully. Strategically. I needed to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my marriage, or at least, teach Ethan and Lila a lesson they would never forget. I began documenting everything. Photos, messages, receipts, eyewitness accounts. I reached out discreetly to people I trusted, allies who could quietly corroborate the truth if I ever needed them. I didn't speak to Ethan about revenge yet. Not directly. I needed him to see the inevitability of his own actions. And as I sat in my study, sipping tea and staring at the growing evidence, I realized something powerful. Age is not weakness, experience is not irrelevant, and betrayal, no matter how cleverly disguised, can be exposed. I wasn't just a victim. I was a strategist. A force. And soon, the storm I had been waiting for would hit. The nights were the hardest. I lay awake in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, my hands clenched around the edges of the sheets. Ethan's betrayal played in my mind like a film I couldn't pause. The laughter, the whispered secrets with Lila, the smiles he once reserved for me, it all felt like knives slicing through my chest. But amidst the pain, a strange clarity emerged. I had spent 60 years surviving life storms, raising children, building a career, and facing heartbreak in ways younger people couldn't imagine. And now, betrayal had come dressed in charm and youth. Yet I was not powerless. I could act. I could take control. I started planning. Slowly, methodically. Every detail of their deceit, every subtle lie, every hidden transaction, they were my pieces to move on a board I alone controlled. I wrote them down in a journal, not as venting, but as a blueprint. Step 1. Collect undeniable proof. I already had photos, texts, emails. But I needed more. I watched their patterns, noted their meeting places, even discovered small lies Ethan told about his work hours that were actually meetings with Lila. I printed everything, organized it meticulously. Step 2. Determine the impact. I knew exposing Ethan's betrayal could hurt him, but I also knew it could save him. If he realized how manipulative Lila truly was, he might be able to choose wisely. But I wasn't sure if he was ready. Younger men are impressionable, and love can blind them. Step 3. Identify allies. I reached out to 2 trusted colleagues and a family friend who knew Ethan from his childhood. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to plant seeds of awareness. People who see the truth from different angles help reinforce reality. Step 4. Test their limits. I began small. Casual questions, feigned ignorance, subtle hints about what I knew. I watched Ethan squirm. He still tried to charm, to explain, to manipulate, but the cracks in his composure grew wider each day. Lila, of course, remained unaware that I had been silently observing, quietly documenting, and mentally mapping every move. The emotional turmoil was exhausting. There were mornings I cried openly, alone in the kitchen, spooning cereal I didn't taste. Nights I paced the garden, hands gripping the railings, asking myself how love could turn so sour so quickly. But with each wave of pain, I reminded myself, this was not revenge for revenge's sake. It was for dignity, for justice, and for truth. I also had to protect myself. I created a digital folder of everything, secured in multiple locations. I didn't want Ethan or Lila to think they could destroy evidence or rewrite history. Every email, every photo, every receipt was accounted for. I began envisioning scenarios. Not violent, not cruel, but strategic. What if I showed Ethan the full extent of Lila's manipulation in a way he couldn't ignore? What if I exposed the lies publicly in a controlled manner, safeguarding our reputations while holding them accountable? What if I forced Lila to reveal her true colors without me saying a word? And then there was the psychological aspect. People underestimate experience, age, and patience. Lila thought she could play a young man's mind, twist him like clay. But I understood human nature in a way she never could. She was impulsive, driven by desire and ego. Ethan was naive, blinded by infatuation. I had decades of foresight, and I intended to use it. I began rehearsing confrontations silently, in front of the mirror. My voice calm, measured, unshakable. I imagined Lila's surprise when I revealed the full evidence. I imagined Ethan's realization that I had known all along, yet had remained composed. I imagined the shock, the ripple effect, the way truth can topple carefully built illusions. During this period, Ethan tried to reassure me, to placate me, to claim it was just a phase. But I had grown too wary, too wise. I smiled politely, nodded, and let him speak. Meanwhile, every word, every gesture, every attempt at charm was logged in my mind, a piece of the larger picture. I also began to consider indirect pressure. Mutual friends, colleagues, even Lila's social circle, people she trusted who could unknowingly validate reality once I provided subtle nudges. I didn't need to attack openly, I only needed to orchestrate circumstances so that the truth became unavoidable. The emotional struggle was immense. I felt anger, betrayal, sadness, and a small, intoxicating thrill at the thought of holding the upper hand. My nights were restless, my days full of quiet observation, and yet a part of me savored the growing anticipation. This wasn't cruelty, it was survival and reclamation. Finally, after weeks of preparation, I outlined the first phase of my plan in detail. I would start with Ethan. He needed to face the truth fully, with incontrovertible evidence. Then, carefully, I would let Lila's manipulation unravel naturally, exposing her to those who mattered most. And throughout, I would remain composed, unshaken, a figure of authority and wisdom. By the end of this stage, I had transformed. From heartbreak and betrayal, I had carved clarity, patience, and resolve. I was ready to act, ready to protect my dignity, and ready to reclaim the balance that had been disrupted by deception. And so, the stage was set. The pieces were in place. The actors unaware. And Margaret, 60 years old, was about to show that experience, patience, and strategic thinking could wield a power far beyond youth or charm. The storm was coming. The morning I decided to act, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Weeks of planning, watching, and documenting had sharpened my mind. I wasn't moving out of anger, I was moving out of precision. Every step, every word, every revelation was carefully calculated. I started with Ethan. He had to understand the full scope of his own mistakes. I invited him to the living room, my documents spread neatly across the coffee table. I didn't speak at first. I let him notice the folder, the printed screenshots, the hotel receipts, the messages I had collected over the weeks. His face paled. "Margaret, what is all this?" I didn't answer immediately. I simply slid the folder toward him. "Everything you need to see, Ethan," I said. "Read it, absorb it, and understand. You can't hide behind excuses anymore." He hesitated, but he opened the folder. His eyes widened as he read through the proof of his ongoing affair with Lila. The dates, the messages, the meetings, all meticulously documented. I watched as the weight of truth finally hit him, and the charm and youthful arrogance dissolved into guilt and shame. "Margaret. I didn't mean," he stammered. "Stop," I said firmly. "No excuses. You've made your choices. Now it's time to face the consequences." Ethan left that afternoon, no longer able to look me in the eye. I didn't need to force him out, his own shame drove him to retreat. Next, I turned my attention to Lila. I knew her well enough to predict her behavior, impulsive, proud, and dependent on public perception. She thrived on attention, and I planned to make that the very thing that exposed her. I contacted mutual friends, sending subtle hints, anonymous messages, gentle suggestions that something isn't as it seems. Slowly, whispers began circulating in her social circle, creating cracks in her carefully constructed image. Meanwhile, I organized a public event at my publishing company, an anniversary celebration. Lila, thinking it would be harmless networking, attended, unaware that I had arranged for key witnesses to be present. During casual conversation, I mentioned topics that revealed her lies without direct confrontation, missed meetings, false statements about her work, discrepancies in shared accounts. The people around her began asking questions. The panic in her eyes was subtle but unmistakable. I then deployed the final part of my plan, proof for the world. I shared select documents with a trusted journalist, ensuring anonymity. Nothing illegal, nothing exaggerated, just the truth. Emails, photos, and receipts that validated the betrayal. The article went live quietly but effectively. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances who had admired Lila now viewed her differently. Her social credibility, carefully cultivated, began to crumble. Ethan, now fully aware of the consequences of his choices, tried to intervene. "Margaret, please, don't do this publicly," he pleaded. I smiled, a calm, unwavering smile. "I'm not doing it to hurt you, Ethan. I'm doing it to preserve truth, integrity, and my dignity. If you care about any of those things, you will accept the consequences of your actions." The next week, I confronted Lila directly. It was in her apartment, where she believed she was safe. I laid out everything, the timeline, the proof, the manipulation, and the consequences. She tried to deflect, to charm, to manipulate, but I was prepared. Each lie she spoke, I countered with fact, evidence, and calm logic. By the end of the confrontation, she sat in stunned silence, finally realizing that she had underestimated the woman she thought she could control. As word of the exposure spread, Ethan faced his own reckoning. Friends distanced themselves. Mentors, previously impressed by his charm, confronted him with truth. Lila disappeared from the social scene, humiliated but unscathed legally, yet socially, the damage was irreparable. Meanwhile, I reclaimed my life. I returned to the garden, to my books, to the quiet dignity I had always cherished. But there was one more small but satisfying flourish. I contacted several influential figures who had admired Lila, presenting the facts as neutrally as possible. Their reactions confirmed what I had suspected: perception is everything, and once the truth is revealed, influence vanishes. There were moments of reflection too. I didn't relish in cruelty, but I allowed myself satisfaction in seeing justice served. Ethan, though remorseful, learned a valuable lesson about honesty, loyalty, and maturity. Lila, through her own arrogance and manipulation, had orchestrated her social downfall. And I, Margaret, stood as a testament that experience, patience, and strategic thinking can wield a power far beyond youth or charm. I also ensured that no harm extended beyond those who had caused it. Collateral damage was minimal. Friends and family who had no part in the betrayal were informed discreetly, reassured, and kept away from the storm. My children, initially skeptical of my choices, saw the depth of deception and the care with which I acted. Even they couldn't deny that I had restored balance, dignity, and justice. By the end, the social, emotional, and psychological consequences of the betrayal had been fully addressed. Ethan had learned responsibility. Lila had lost influence. I had regained control. And through it all, I had remained composed, strategic, and unwavering, a woman who, at 60, had faced betrayal and turned it into a lesson for all involved. Finally, in the quiet of my living room, I allowed myself to breathe. The storm had passed. I had not only survived, I had outsmarted, outlasted, and reclaimed my life. The revenge had been executed with precision, without cruelty beyond what was necessary to restore balance. And as I sipped my tea that evening, I realized the ultimate truth: age, experience, and intelligence are formidable weapons. Those who underestimate them do so at their own peril. The battle was over. The lesson was learned. And Margaret, though older, wiser, and scarred, had emerged victorious. The house was quiet again, but this time it felt different. Not the uneasy calm of betrayal, but a true, earned peace. I moved through my rooms with the subtle confidence of someone who had faced deception, heartbreak, and manipulation, and emerged unbroken. Ethan had retreated, humbled and cautious. He no longer looked at me with defiance or arrogance, but with a tempered understanding of consequences. I didn't need to lecture him anymore. The lessons were written in the experiences he could never forget. I watched him grow in those weeks and months after the exposure. He matured faster than anyone could have expected, forced into honesty by the weight of his own actions. Lila, on the other hand, disappeared from social gatherings and professional networks. Her influence evaporated almost overnight, a direct result of her manipulations being brought into the light. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had been enough, and seeing someone face the natural consequences of their choices was, in itself, satisfying. Most importantly, I reclaimed myself. The fear of judgment, whispers about marrying a younger man, and the shame of being perceived as naive, all of that dissipated in the clarity of victory. I realized that life isn't about how the world views your choices. It's about knowing your worth, protecting your dignity, and acting with intention when challenged. I also reconnected with my family. My children had watched the unfolding drama with skepticism, unsure of whether I was being reckless or wise. But they saw the careful, strategic way I handled everything, the evidence I presented, the restraint I maintained. Slowly, they began to respect not only my decisions but my strength. We rebuilt trust, not through apologies but through presence, honesty, and the unspoken understanding that I had safeguarded our family's integrity. The social circle, once enchanted by Lila's charm and Ethan's youth, slowly acknowledged the reality of events. It was subtle. Nobody shouted from rooftops, but the shift in perception was undeniable. People learned a lesson about appearances, manipulation, and the quiet power of experience. And I, Margaret, had been the catalyst. Emotionally, the storm left scars, yes. I sometimes caught myself replaying moments of disbelief and pain, wondering how someone so young could be so reckless, how betrayal could hide in the guise of love. But those scars became reminders that vigilance, patience, and strategic thinking are more powerful than impulsive action or unchecked desire. There was also an unexpected peace in knowing that revenge, when done with precision and integrity, is not about cruelty, it's about justice and restoration. I had never aimed to destroy for the sake of destruction. My goal was to expose the truth, hold people accountable, and ensure that no further harm could be done. And in that, I succeeded. I spent my days differently now. Mornings with tea in the sunroom, afternoons tending the garden, evenings curled up with books or writing reflections. I allowed myself small joys again, free from the anxiety that had dominated my life during the weeks of betrayal and planning. And there were lessons, clear and hard-earned. Experience is power. Youth can charm and deceive, but years of observation, wisdom, and patience are formidable. Truth always surfaces. Lies, no matter how carefully hidden, leave traces. With diligence, they can be uncovered. Calm strategy beats impulsive rage. My revenge was not loud or destructive. It was surgical, precise, and effective. Boundaries protect dignity. I learned to set limits, even with someone I loved, to preserve my integrity and self-respect. As I reflected on everything, I realized something vital. Life doesn't always go the way we plan, but how we respond defines our story. I could have reacted with uncontrolled anger, but I chose patience, intelligence, and courage. I could have let humiliation consume me, but I turned it into empowerment. Margaret, at 60, had discovered a truth younger women often learn the hard way: strength is not measured by youth or beauty, but by resilience, wisdom, and the ability to navigate treachery without losing yourself. The storm had passed, the truth had prevailed, and I had emerged not only victorious but wiser, stronger, and unafraid. Life was mine again, on my terms, shaped by decades of experience, and colored by the lessons of betrayal, justice, and quiet triumph. And if anyone ever questions my choices, the marriage, the patience, the careful strategy, I smile quietly to myself. Because I know the full story. I know the truth. And I know the power of a woman who refuses to be fooled, even when love makes her vulnerable. The world may have judged my marriage, my decisions, and even my methods, but I had learned that the most important judgment is your own. And in that regard, I had never been more certain, more resolute, or more free.